Government Department, and I want to welcome all of you to this special opportunity to hear from our colleague, who I'll introduce in a moment. I want to recognize that this event is co-sponsored by the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies and the Democracy and Governance program at Georgetown University. In short, SFS and Government Department are joining forces to make this happen, and I'm very delighted. This is the second time now that we've had a chance to do something like this. The last time we actually did something like this was when Ghanouchi was here last year. So you're following Ghanouchi's footsteps.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone. We are very happy to have my friend and colleague Professor Haykel Ben Mahfoudh here today, a university professor at the Faculty of Law and Political Science at the University of Tunis, Carthage. And Haykel has been working on and off with us for some time on a project that's going to eventually bring colleagues to Tunis to do some teaching, and professors and students from Carthage, from the faculty there, back here to DC, and we're looking forward to making that program happen. I also should mention that Professor Mahfoudh is also a non-resident fellow at the Hariri Center, which is part, of course, of the Atlantic Council's Middle East program. I want to also recognize very quickly the work of Justin and Professor Jonathan Morse here in helping to organize this event. Haykel is going to talk for about 15 or 20 minutes on the subject of democratization and security in Tunisia. It's been an issue that has been uppermost on the minds of both policymakers and scholars. Good afternoon, sir. In Tunisia, when I was in Tunis 2 weekends ago, this was the constant discussion of the nexus of these two issues, and it seems to me obviously important given the challenges in the region, specifically what is happening in Libya. So, Haykel, you have the floor for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to express the privilege that being invited here by Georgetown University, as you mentioned, the Democracy and Governance program and the CCAS. Okay. Right. So I'm very much thankful for that, for the invitation. I have to extend also my thanks to you personally, Dan, to Justin and to Yoni, who are very helpful in organizing all the logistical things to bring me here. My talk will focus on, as Dan mentioned, on security and democracy, or vice versa, democratization and security. And the first point, as let's say an introduction, will be a couple of information about the ongoing process, democratization process in Tunisia, to put you in the picture. After the constitution and having ratified the constitution last January, exactly on the 27th, 2014, this year, we had to pass an electoral law and to manage or to organize the first, let's say, elections for electing permanent institutions, because we did have first elections, democratic elections, in October 2011, and that was to elect a constituent assembly, which the mandate was to elaborate and write a constitution for the country. It acted as a parliament also, and have appointed the government, or the two first governments, essentially. But the mandate was clear. Now, the next stage is first to implement the constitution, because the new constitution came up with a full institutional rearrangements, with a new political regime, even I would say new political system, with institutions that have to be reformed or to be implemented, like a kind of constitutional court for the first time, of our experience in Tunisia, and this has been a popular demand for years and decades. So these are part of, let's say, the institutional arrangement that the upcoming elections are going to trigger as in terms of sequencing. The elections also are two main appointments. Because we are going to have on October 26th the election of a new parliament, and this will be for a 5 years mandate term. And afterwards, right after a month later, we will have the elections of the president. And this will be also for the same term, 5 years term. And these will be the first elections really of a democratic and freely elected parliament, and also freely elected and democratically elected president, because the current one was elected through the Constituent Assembly. It was not a direct voting from the people. So, and this, let's say, political momentum will lead also to appoint a government for the same term. And the government is part of the executive, and maybe it's the core body of the executive, because it is the government which designs the different policies in different areas, except in defense, security and foreign affairs, which pertains to the president himself. And the government has the charge, let's say, or the duty to implement all political choices in the country, and is responsible vis-à-vis to the parliament. So, to put you in the picture, why the elections, the upcoming elections, are so important? I've mentioned a couple of reasons, because they are going to pave the way for permanent institutions, and this will lead Tunisia to maybe get from one point, which is point B, let's call it, to point C, D, and etc. And these following points are dealing with consolidating the consolidation of the democracy and the democratic system itself. Nevertheless, this upcoming constitution will occur in a very specific context, not only because they have a different nature from the previous ones, but because there are let's say, the context, the environment has tremendously changed since 2011, with more, let's say, instability in terms of security situation, in terms also of economic recession, and nonetheless in terms of efficiency of the government and the state institution themselves. And this makes a lot of pressure on the elections, not only the elections as institutional understanding or meaning of the elections, but also on the main political stakeholders in the country, and I mean that the political parties themselves, whether they are from, let's call them the secular side or wing, or the Islamist side, but also the players, the key players that were effective and active enough to bring the country to a consensus around and about the constitution. I mean by that the UGTT, which is the major labor union in the country, and the UTK, which is, I mean, the major also union of the businessmen and economic in the economic sector, and were the driving force essentially to, in addition to the civil society, the driving forces for the national dialogue. So what matters for the next elections first is security challenges. As you may know, Tunisia is facing terrorism as a threat, real threat. Security forces are on the field in different parts of the country. Some of the areas in the country has been declared as military operational zones, or we have even created some buffer zones in order to prevent any illegal activity in these areas, specific areas, mainly those who are nearing the Libyan borders and some of the on the west, southwest, on the Algerian borders. The government is cracking down on some rogue elements in the country, and the fights are still going on in Shambi mountains, and sometimes we listen, we hear, we learn about some military operations. Some of the Tunisian soldiers were killed last summer. It wasn't the first time. And as the elections are nearing, the security issues are getting more and more serious, and the threat, I guess, higher than ever before. Because what is at stake, really, it's not just the elections as a moment, as a step, but it is the entire democratization in the country, and if not in the region. We've seen what is going on in Libya, the Egyptian experience, in Yemen, what is happening now, and we can understand the concerns, the real security concerns. Security is also a concern for different causes. We have an uncontrolled smuggling and trafficking throughout the borders in Tunisia. We have to learn and to know that almost 50% of our economy is not from the formal sector. Is part of it is from the informal sector, smuggling, trafficking. Any kind of trafficking, of course. Arms trafficking came through the Libyan borders, and we have different important number of pieces of arms circulating throughout the country, so that's a major concern. And our security forces will never, they don't have really the experience. They are getting the experience now to face these kind of challenges, but never before to really train to cope and to manage this kind of hard security issues, because the Tunisian position in the country and in the Maghreb, North Africa and the Mediterranean has other concerns. It's much about, let's say, illegal migration rather than about trafficking and smuggling. The other point also, and we can during the discussion, I can go on further details on that, is about Syria. The situation in Syria and the number of Tunisians involved in that conflict. Let's call it a conflict, properly. And the main concern of the Tunisian society and the institution is the issue of the returnees from Syria. The government, the Ministry of Interior just said that 250 already back to Tunisia, and that the government prevented maybe more than almost 9,000 Tunisians, young Tunisians, to go fighting in Syria. The figures of Tunisian killed on the front line, it's important, quite important. I don't have the exact, but it's around, I don't know, 1,000, even more. So this is a real threat, because we don't know what are the projects and what will be the projects of these returnees. Some of them had already entered the borders, but some of them are posted on the other side of the borders, which means on the Libyan side, And we don't know what kind of project they are preparing, if they are planning any terrorist attack, etc. So there is a big question mark on that. And we understand that this makes a lot of pressure on the security institutions themselves. It's time-consuming, it's energy-consuming, and sometimes they are not well prepared, well equipped in order to face this kind of threats. And also, if they are back, these people, what the society should do? Should the society reject them? Or should we prepare ourselves for a redemption, kind of redemption and reintegration program, but on what basis, what would be the agenda, how, etc. So this is really a major, actually a big debate within the Tunisian society and the Tunisian compound. So the challenge for the government is to create a conducive environment for wide public participation, essentially for the upcoming elections, whereas security is becoming a real obsession. But the point is that we haven't seen or noticed on the political parties practical in their projects, practical suggestions on how to deal and how to cope with these security issues. Rather, we had some broad lines which try to define or to talk on security issues, which is not enough in terms of people needs and expectations, because they need efficiency in terms of providing security. This brings me to the second point, and one of the stakes of the upcoming elections is to know who is going to win or to lose the elections. I'm bad in predictions because I tried to predict in 2011 and I was totally wrong. So I'm not going to engage myself on any prediction exercise. But the reason where I'm trying to prevent myself from any prediction is that we don't see actually in the polls, let's say, any clear majority throughout the different political actors. And I think that there should be, to some extent or to a larger extent, a coalition that has to be built up. Because nobody's, apparently I say, nobody's going to have the clear majority. So I will leave it to the political actors to find out how to set up their own agreements.
I thought for a minute you'd leave it to me. I was scared you were pointing.
Yeah. Unless you are a political actor.
No, I'm not at all.
But I think that the real question is not about who is going to govern, but how. Quality of governance and good governance is major and will be the major issue for the upcoming years. Not only for the upcoming 5 years, but maybe 10 years. Because what we learned from the previous experiences and under the government of the Troika government, which was led by another essentially, is that the issue was that these people who were in charge of the affairs failed to deliver. Failed to deliver on security, on economic. I will raise a couple of points on the economic situation at the end, on the economic problems, on the social cohesion, on institutional reforms, and the reasons or the cause of such a failure, part of it was lack of experience. Lack of experience in, let's say, in political affairs. So there is a need to build capacities. And I think that what went through the national dialogue for technocracy will lead people and even some political actors think twice before going through, let's say, the kind of classical institutional arrangements, which means that the winner of the elections will have to appoint the government, etc. That doesn't mean, not take me wrong, that we're gonna put aside, leave away the constitution and define new rules of the game. No. But I think in terms of expectations, the people and needs, maybe the actual government, the current government, has been more successful, at least from the people's perspective, than the previous, the politicians themselves. So we'll see after the elections, and the political parties are quite, let's say, anxious about this, who's going to form the government. And some of them have extended, let's say, their hands to the others, and even suggested that let's build a consensus around the president, for instance, and have a national coalition for the government. This made some other political parties nervous about the democratic and the pluralistic games. But I think at the end of the day, issue of expertise, good governance, and the capacity to deliver on specific and immediate issues will prevail. And this maybe go through again the national dialogue in terms of institutional arrangements. The third point, and I hope I'm still...
You can, look, you go on as much as you like.
Yeah, would be the economic issues. Economy is very bad in Tunisia. But it's kind of tricky, let's call it like this, topic, situation. Because it's bad, we are suffering, cost of life went very high, up. We are, as a taxpayer, being called to make our own contribution. Our salaries will be cut for 3 or 4 days the next month to make a contribution and to make, let's say, to reform what we call the subsidies system in the country. But on the other hand, we have more than 1.5 million Libyans staying in Tunisia, living maybe, going back and forth the Tunisian and Libyan borders. Though this number has a great pressure on the economy, on the financial, let's say, on the budget possibilities of the state, of the country, but these people also brings money. These people also brings money, so they are part of the economic dynamics in the country. So part of it, we are thankful to our brothers and neighbors from Libya for bringing their contribution to the national economy, but still, there is no investment behind that. And the issue is not only of the Libyans, because all the international actors who may bring support in terms of investment, they are refraining themselves to invest really unless, they get more clarification on the political development and the situation in Tunisia, and mainly on the security level. So there is a strong recession in Tunisia. We are even reviewing to a lower level the growth rate this year. We have expected, or we predicted, to have more than 3 points of growth, but I think that we'll have 2.2, which is not enough. Tunisia needs even 6, 7, at least, I would say. And the economic situation is, let's say, clear reason for social unrest. And since, the social actors are very active in Tunisia, and I mean by that the UGTT, the major labor union, So we can agree to some extent with the government on, when I say we as a union, I mean labor union, they can agree on, let's say, memorandum or let's momentum on a kind of a truce period, ceasefire, let's call it like that. No strikes, no call for salary raises, but not for a long term. That will be possible for a 2 months period until we get the election, but the negotiation, the social negotiation, which means also on the other side social unrest, will be again very active. And if you have social unrest, that's again a security concern. I'm not trying to sum up everything within the single security folder, but that's the reality. So up to now I drawn a rather black picture of Tunisia, and then you can ask me and tell me, well, this is a very negative and even skeptical picturing of this Tunisian democratization and experience. I'm a positive and I'm an optimist. And I do think that Tunisia did quite well. And though I don't like really the word of success, whether it is a success story, it's a model for the region, etc., I'm not very fond of this kind of expression, but I can tell you 2 reasons that maybe can provide you some entry point to understand the process in Tunisia and how it's working. First, the administration, public institution. It is a country, I call it a legalistic country. This has to do with the French tradition, okay? And administration it's the system. And administration, public administration, I mean, I think we are thankful for the public administration, though we have corruption, lack of transparency, etc., all these governance issues and bad governance issues, but it was quite successful to provide on a sustainable basis the basic needs of the people. The challenge for the administration, and here is the issue of reforming the administration, is to make it not state provider but a citizens service provider. But at least we have institutions. I remember January 15th, 2011, electricity was still running, no shortage in terms of water supplies, transportation, ATMs, etc. Everything was working except security. The other thing that made, I think, Tunisia moving forward, that we learned lessons from the past. I remember in 1987 when Ben Ali toppled Bourguiba, we were on the streets celebrating the event of a new era. And since that time, Ben Ali himself overconsumed and overused the expression "a new era." After 20 years, we're still in a new era, but haven't seen the outcomes of the new era. But when we celebrated that, we provided the regime and Ben Ali with the white or blank check. And he did whatever he wanted to do in the political sector, in the economic sector, etc. In January 2011, we haven't celebrated. We were anxious. We had a lot of worries. And I think civil society and media, and we have to be thankful for that, were quite active in always trying to put the path on the right way. But the main, I think, reason that makes Tunisia moving forward is that we did not take shortcuts. We went through a very complicated path of transformation. We were supposed to have a constitution. After 1 year, we spent 3 years, after, let's say, great political infights, after political assassinations, but at least we try to pave the way and to make solid and build democratic transition on robust pillars. So no shortcuts means that at the end of the day we are successful to build consensus in this country. And to conclude, and we were just talking about that, I think that it's worth, let's say, tempting to have the Tunisian as a national dialogue, as a study case. But you get lost maybe to understand really, if not to try to deconstruct and rebuild the whole mechanism itself, because it's proper to the Tunisian society, mentality. And I will give you an example just to finish with that. The general union, I mean the labor union, is as a syndicate is one of the biggest, if not the largest one in Africa. Almost 1 million members. Okay, for a population of 10 million and a half. It's a huge number. And on that basis, and this backs to the early 20s, by the way, the labor union tradition in Tunisia of the previous century, of course, the last century. And right after the revolution, security forces also started to set up their own unions. And these are key actors in the, let's say, even the political process itself. They were quite active, for instance, for the appointment of Minister of Interior in the technocrats' government. And they have already almost imposed their candidate. Okay? So try to understand these dynamics, how they are working, and what are the driving forces. This is very specific because they shaped the police union on the, let's say, social labor union, and their working, and their policies, and their activities, etc. And this is very specific to Tunisia. So this makes me quite optimistic, confident. We're gonna going through, let's say, political crisis, but still at the end of the day, after maybe 10 years, 15 years, then we can consider Tunisia as, I won't say a perfect democracy, but a workable democracy. Now we can consider it just as an imperfect moving towards the democratization path, but still we have achieved a lot. Thank you very much again, and I'm very looking forward to have your questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Haykel. As the chair, I'm going to use my awesome power here. Saying the first question, then open it up. So many questions I have based on a very interesting presentation. I was reminded when you were talking about how the Ben Ali era was seen as this new era that kept going on and on forever. And when I was a student in Cairo, at Cairo University a long time ago, they used to talk about Egypt as a country that was in marhala intikaliya. Yeah. And it was, a transitional phase that was going on forever. They're in the third stage of this transition, or fourth in Egypt, whereas in Tunisia you're in a real transition. Yeah. That's something, as you say, that's substantive, that is real. And what distinguishes Tunisia from the region, whether we call it a success or not, it's certainly a relative success, is that the politics are real. The transition is real, and the stages that you went through, the thresholds are real, and there's a certain amount of momentum. I thought when you mentioned the fact that they took 3 years rather than 1, you take the time, there's a lot, the people go to the brink, there's a lot of dialogue and fighting and so on, but you reach the brink and you stand back and you made the critical step. So it's impressive, but I recall that after the 2 assassinations, in Tunisia, my colleagues who work on Pakistan and other countries, they say, well, we have 25 assassinations a day. Tunisians were shocked by those assassinations. It's not a country that's used to that level of political violence. And that is worth remembering. And at the same time, it further polarized the situation in many respects. And it was certainly, the assassinations were events that, quite understandably, galvanized certain political parties and certain dynamics, and also eventually compelled the Ennahda party to get more serious, and eventually, I suppose in some sense, step aside for the new government. But I'm wondering, given the fact that you've described the security situation as somewhat perilous, and when I was in Tunisia, everybody kept talking about how this impression in the West was that things were stable and successful, but things on the ground people felt were very unsure. And people were very worried, particularly by the situation with the border, and people kept talking about Daesh in Syria and in Iraq and so on, coming to Tunisia, and the young people were going to fight and so on. What would be the result? How would let's imagine for a moment that either in the lead up to the elections there is an attack of some kind, and people talk about a lot of this possibility, or after the elections there's some assassination or a bomb attack. One possibility is that one side or the other will exploit this event to try to push the other side in the context of negotiation. The other possibility is that maybe this will galvanize more unity. Would a democratic election and a coalition government provide, I know you're asked to predict here, you want to avoid that, I understand that, but I'm trying to imagine, does the success and momentum of democracy provide a basis for responding to these events? Everybody must perhaps assume that this is a possibility. And are people asking about how, or is it simply something that we'll have to wait and see? How does it affect the unity of any unity government? That's my question. So I put that to you, and then after you respond, we'll open up to group.
Well, that's a tough question.
It is a tough question. I'm sorry to ask you a tough question.
Well,
and I know you're based on, we have to engage in your futurology here, but I recall how shocked people were by the previous assassination and the effect on the negotiations, and I just wonder, the country is vulnerable, and it could be that something will happen.
It is. I mean, let me tell you. I mean, when Chokri Belaid was assassinated in February, 6 February 2013. I was having a meeting at the Ministry of the Interior, the main building on Bourguiba Street. And I remember, as a citizen, I was shocked, as a former colleague to him, because he was a lawyer and I did practice as a lawyer, so I had a chance to know him, to get known him. I was also, I had a kind of trauma, but what surprised me, the people working inside the Ministry of Interior were literally shocked. I wasn't to expect such reaction and in their inner affect, really, as citizens. They forgot that they were there to work and that this is the institution, etc., and they act as citizens. And almost 1 million people were on the streets that day for the Chokri Belaid funerals. And I think that when we start talking about national dialogue, etc., I think it started there, really. It started there, let's say, the understanding that something is wrong with the system, something is wrong with the capacity to deliver security on efficient and democratic basis, human rights respect, essentially. So, and this was confirmed with the assassination of Brahmi in July 2013, and then the assassination of, or the killing of 9 or 11 soldiers in Shambi, etc. And I think that strengthened, to certain extents, a national consensus, or at least a national unity. So to answer your question, Dan, I think that we have more positive, let's say, signs and signals to know that maybe any attack would not provoke, let's say, the collapse of the entire democratic process, but instead it will bring more cohesion about national unity and the need to support the state, institution, and the security forces in their engagement against the terrorists and the rogue elements. But still, this is again not white and a blank check to give to them, okay? And here comes the issue of governance and democratic governance of the security sector. And the last debate on the anti-terrorism draft law on that, and whether we have to focus only on efficiency or to try to resolve the equation between efficiency and the human rights, reflects that need to make a real balance between the two sides of the coin, really. But I think national cohesion is at the center of any process, or any also threat which the country is facing, would be facing.
Oh, thank you. The gentleman in the red tie, please identify yourself, please, as well.
Bill Lawrence, George Washington University and other. First question about Nehda strategy. You never want to be the party that wins an election right after a revolution as the economy tanks. And there was even a debate within Nehda about how strongly, almost like the PJD in Morocco debates about whether to win the election or not. There was a debate within Nehda before the 2011 election about how strongly they wanted to show. When they stepped out of government in 2013, it actually, I think, improved the polling as a technocratic government stepped in and they didn't have to be. And now Nehda is talking about a unity government, as I'm increasingly hearing from the secular side, more and more disinterest in a unity government. So I was wondering if you could sort of think a little bit about this whole strategy of unity governments, being in of power, out of power as the major party. Second question, the list of presidential candidates is really interesting in terms of who's there and who's not there. You know, Bejika and Sebsi and Marzouki are looking good, but you have others like Shadbi and Morjan and Hamami. And so I was just wondering if you could just, without predicting the future, your comments on the presidential field. And my last question, and very short, my fourth question he already asked. So this is
good.
The last
I'm
question.
happy because each customer gets 3 questions.
The third question is the youth vote was, by some estimates, around 15% in the last election. These next elections will probably have an even lower turnout globally, and I would presume that the youth vote won't improve much, but maybe we're wrong. So I was wondering if you could just talk about, I mean, the over 40s are going to vote, and they're proud to vote, and they lived through this, but the younger crowd is just not voting, and I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, and I think that we will have the opportunity to talk further. Yeah. For your first question about another strategy, I will turn it to you with another question. Should we use the single or the plural about another?
Yeah.
Does another have a single strategy or many strategies? Let me give you an example. Internally, another is trying to sell a new image, okay? But externally, abroad, another is still very much focused on Islam, on democracy, things that we thought in the country we had already sorted. So, let's say the dual use or the double discourse of another is quite misleading to some extent. What I can say about another strategy, that another maybe made their own self-criticism about the period where they were in the government. They did with not only another, I mean it was the same with the CPR, I mean the Marzouki party or the Takatul of Ben Jaffer. They did a lot of mistakes. Whether they learned from their mistakes, I'm not really sure. Why? I'm saying that because if we look to their political programs and discourses, they keep saying that we have made our self-criticism, we learn, and now we are ready to govern again. I mean, we don't move from a lower level of expertise to a higher level of expertise because we just have learned for our past previous experiences. I mean, delivering security is not because we failed in 2011 and now we are not going to make the same mistakes in 2014, whereas the situation has tremendously changed. That's one point. I think also the strategy of another to reach out with other political parties and to build a consensus around this idea of a consensual president has to some extent is significant. In what terms? In terms that first, the presidential elections are not the major elections. And let me raise another issue here, is that it's a kind of paradox. The most important elections, and the first one, would be the legislative elections for the parliament. The focus in the political debate, actually, and in the media, is on the presidential elections. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So, this is part of the strategy, because it's not the priority. Also, maybe because another does know that they have lost part of their electorate, maybe, and they try to, let's say, figure or to provide a new, let's say, shape, visage of another, but another on the other side keeps saying that they will be the winners of the next elections. It's not a matter of predicting, making predictions, but real politics. Another will be part of any upcoming government in the country. It's not a matter of saying, well, another want to have the 42% of 2011 and another is going to be 5 or 6% just because they have failed over the past few years. No, that's not reasonable at all. But still, I think that the idea to build a national union government is worth looking, really. Whether the other political parties will accept or not, I think that at least the political appetite will be there to bring more people than we could think. List of presidential candidates, I mean, it's not only the list of presidential candidates. Look to the parliamentary candidates. We have more than 1,300 lists for only 217 seats. I think that we haven't learned lessons from the past elections, and the voting and the structure of the political landscape is still scattered, really, and this will make any consensus or coalition hard to set up. But on the other hand, and I can get your idea, is that the issue is not an issue of number. Up to today we have 25 candidates, I think. But the quality of the candidates, again, that's the issue. And some of them are good, some of them do not have any experience. They may be coming from the business sector, but I don't think that politics has to do essentially with business management activities.
And I forgot to mention Nebli, who's definitely one of the leading.
Yeah, Nebli maybe has his choices, his chances, but Kamel Morjan as well. He has a great international support. But I mean, the quality of the candidates is much more important. The issue of youth participation, I think there is a big concern not only on the youth, but on the rates of abstention. And we expect, at least, that the rates will be much higher than the previous elections. The previous elections where the participation rate turnout was about 54%. It's not excluded for different reasons that we have less this time, and that would be
the overall rate, you mean?
The overall, yes, the overall. And at the end of the day, some of the political parties will have taken advantage, benefit from that situation, and this maybe answers your first question, sir.
Thank you.